Corporate jargon affects 58% of professionals across 8 countries who say their coworkers overuse it. 40% have made a mistake because they didn't understand a term someone used. And a quarter of office workers say corporate language makes them feel completely disconnected from their colleagues. This isn't a minor communication hiccup. It's a systemic problem hiding in plain sight, disguised as professionalism. There's a real difference between jargon that communicates and jargon that conceals, and the line between them is thinner than most people think. Daria Batina, a lecturer in UCLA's linguistics department, puts it this way: language isn't just about sharing information, it's social. When we speak, we're not only passing facts back and forth, we're performing relationships, identities, affiliations, and stances. Think about that for a moment. Every time you drop an acronym in a meeting, you're not just conveying information, you're signaling who you are, who you're aligned with, and implicitly, who doesn't belong. Eric Anicic, an associate professor at USC's Marshall School of Business, takes this even further. He says shared jargon can foster a sense of identity and community, that speaking the same language as everyone else is a way of saying, I belong here. And in that sense, office jargon doesn't just describe reality. Anicic says it reprograms it, dividing those who are in from those who'll never fully understand. That's not a communication tool. That's a sorting mechanism. And no one illustrated this more memorably than Elon Musk. In May 2010, Musk sent an email to every employee at SpaceX with a subject line that has since become legendary: acronyms seriously suck. In it, he wrote, excessive use of made-up acronyms is a significant impediment to communication, and keeping communication good as we grow is incredibly important. Individually, a few acronyms here and there may not seem so bad, but if 1,000 people are making these up, over time the result will be a huge glossary that we have to issue to new employees. No one can actually remember all these acronyms, and people don't want to seem dumb in a meeting, so they just sit there in ignorance. That last line is the entire problem distilled into a single sentence, and Musk even pointed out the absurdity from a purely practical standpoint. He highlighted how one internal acronym, VTS3, was 4 syllables, compared to tripod, which is 2. The acronym took longer to say than the actual word it was replacing. It wasn't saving time, it was creating a barrier. And here's what Musk identified that most people miss. Tolerating acronyms leads to a propensity to create more acronyms. It compounds. Different departments start using different acronyms for the same concept, and before long, someone listening to a conversation between 2 teams could be forgiven for thinking they'd accidentally walked into a cult meeting. Now, you might be thinking this is just about efficiency, that people are being lazy or unclear, and sometimes that's true. But there's a darker dimension here, and the research backs it up. Adam Galinsky, a professor at Columbia Business School, has studied what language reveals about power and status. He says we often create language that's unique to our group, that people joke when you get hired at Google, they hand you a dictionary so you can understand all the terms. It creates cohesion and solidarity within a group, but it also creates insiders and outsiders. And here's the psychological kicker. Galinsky's research found that when people feel insecure about their status, they lean on jargon as a signal to convey higher standing. The same way someone might wear an expensive watch or drive a luxury car. He calls it compensatory conspicuous communication, and the pattern is striking. The people who feel most uncertain about their position are the ones most likely to weaponize language to protect it. So, it's not the most senior, most confident leaders peppering their speech with buzzwords. It's often the people trying hardest to look like they belong, which means jargon doesn't flow from competence. It flows from insecurity. And the irony is that it backfires. Research shows that using vague nouns and verbs instead of specific ones can actually make people doubt you're telling the truth. Jargon doesn't make leaders appear more authoritative. It makes them appear less trustworthy. Now let's look at what the data actually tells us about the impact on real workers. A massive study by Duolingo and LinkedIn surveyed more than 8,000 working professionals across 8 countries. 60% of respondents said they had to learn workplace jargon entirely on their own. Nobody taught them. No onboarding session covered it. They were just expected to figure it out. 57% said misunderstanding jargon wastes time every single month. And 40%, nearly half, reported making a mistake directly because they didn't understand a term. Think about the cost of that. Not just in hurt feelings, but in actual business outcomes. Wrong deliverables, missed deadlines, failed collaborations, all because someone used a term that another person was too afraid to ask about. And the fear is real. Research from HRD Connect found that 31% of workers say corporate jargon makes them feel less confident speaking to senior colleagues. A quarter say it makes them feel disconnected from their team entirely. That's not a language problem. That's a culture problem. In 2025, Dr. Olivia Bullock at the University of Florida published a landmark study in the International Journal of Business Communication. Her team tested 1,826 participants and found that jargon doesn't just confuse people, it fundamentally undermines their sense of self-efficacy, their belief that they can actually do their job. Bullock's conclusion was devastating in its clarity. Jargon doesn't just make people feel bad about the information they've been given, it makes them feel bad about themselves. And you need people to be willing to collaborate, share ideas, and seek out more information when they don't understand something. Jargon actively impedes that information flow across teams. Her recommendation was equally unambiguous. Always reduce jargon. The benefit of using it doesn't outweigh the cost. And who suffers the most? The impact isn't evenly distributed. The groups hit hardest are new employees struggling to decode specialized terminology, non-native English speakers for whom industry-specific language adds an entirely additional layer of complexity, cross-functional teams where specialists from different departments speak what might as well be different languages, and external stakeholders like clients and partners who feel alienated by terminology that was never meant for them. Multiply that across an organization that claims to value diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Neuroleadership Institute put it plainly: jargon excludes people. If leaders are trying to create an inclusive workplace, the last thing they should do is encourage a bizarre language of office speak that not everybody understands. Plain language isn't dumbing things down. It's respecting your audience enough to actually communicate with them. Now let's talk about one of the most insidious applications of corporate jargon, the language companies use during layoffs. In January 2024, tens of thousands of workers lost their jobs. The tech industry alone cut 32,000 roles in a single month, and pay attention to the language companies chose. Spotify said they were being right-sized. Citigroup called it a simplified operating model while cutting 20,000 jobs. Meta referred to org changes. UPS announced a workforce reduction for 12,000 positions. Sandra Zucker, a professor at Harvard Business School who researches layoffs, identifies exactly what's happening. One of the types of moral disengagement is euphemistic labeling, she says. So instead of saying, "I am ending Sandra's employment where she has worked for 15 years, you say, "I am restructuring." The language creates emotional distance, letting decision-makers avoid confronting the human reality of what they're doing. Stanford professor Robert Sutton warns of what he calls jargon monoxide, this linguistic anesthesia intended to dampen emotional reactions that actually amplifies frustration and disillusionment among the people left behind. The disconnect between the language and the reality creates cognitive dissonance. Employees hear words like streamlining and realignment while watching their friends clean out their desks, and that internal conflict drives increased stress, reduced productivity, and a deep sense that the organization simply cannot be trusted to tell the truth. Anitich points to a parallel from the financial crisis, where phrases like synthetic CDOs and tranches of debt products masked the true scale of catastrophic risk. The language didn't clarify, it concealed, and millions of people paid the price. even popular culture has started to satirize all of this. The TV show Severance, set in the fictional Lumen Industries, parodies the language of modern employment with absurdities like office retreat team building occurrences and waffle parties. It works as satire because it's barely an exaggeration. In March 2026, researchers at Cornell University took things a step further. Shane Luttrell and his team developed what they call the Corporate BS Receptivity Scale, a tool designed to measure how susceptible individuals are to empty organizational rhetoric. Their findings were striking. Higher scores on the scale, meaning people who were more easily impressed by corporate jargon, were associated with weaker analytic thinking, lower fluid intelligence, and poorer performance on simulated workplace decision-making tests. Even after controlling for job satisfaction and trust in supervisors, susceptibility to corporate jargon remained a significant negative predictor of decision-making quality. Luttrell was careful to note the scale isn't ready for use in hiring or promotion decisions. But the implication is clear. Organizations that marinate in buzzwords and empty language may be systematically rewarding the people least equipped to think critically, while alienating the ones who see straight through it. There's also a generational dimension worth noting. The Duolingo and LinkedIn study found that younger employees were actually less thrown off by workplace idioms than older participants. But here's the catch. Dr. Bullock's research suggests younger workers are more vulnerable to the psychological damage. They're more likely to internalize it, to doubt themselves, to withdraw. As Bullock advises, if you're onboarding younger employees, explain everything clearly. So where does this leave us? Kevin Oborn, Managing Director at Office Max New Zealand, offers a simple litmus test. Unless you are positive everyone understands the jargon term you're using, you are potentially confusing them, annoying them, or losing their trust. That's it. That's the standard. If there's even a chance that someone in the room doesn't understand what you're saying, you're not communicating, you're performing. And performance without clarity isn't leadership, it's theater. The data is overwhelming. Nearly half of workers worldwide want to eliminate or reduce jargon in the workplace. In India, that number rises to 70%. In the United States, 56%. These aren't soft preferences. These are professionals telling us that the way we speak at work is actively making things worse. So here's the challenge, and this is directed at every manager, executive, and team lead listening to this. Audit your language. Look at your last 5 emails, your last 3 presentations, your most recent meeting notes. How many terms did you use that a new hire wouldn't understand? How many acronyms did you drop without defining them? How many times did you reach for a complicated phrase when a simple one would have been more honest? Because every time you say, synergize cross-functional deliverables, when you mean work together, you're not sounding smarter. You're building a wall. And every person on the other side of that wall, the new employee, the non-native speaker, the person from a different department, the junior team member who's already intimidated, they all hear something very specific. They hear, this place is not for you. Language is the most accessible tool any leader has. It costs nothing to be clear. It costs nothing to be direct. And the return on plain speaking, in trust, in inclusion, in actual productivity, is enormous. Elon Musk said it back in 2010. The research has been confirming it ever since. Jargon doesn't make you sound smart. It makes everyone around you feel small. And in any organization that actually wants to succeed, that's a cost you simply cannot afford.